Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a safe start to this week. This is going to be a book tag since it's Tag Tuesday, even though it's Tuesday night here in Phoenix. It's going to be the self-aware reader tag, not the self-aware sartorial tag. It was originally created by Courtney Farrader, and it's a great reflective set of prompts. I love these ones that sort of like make me dig through my own mind. I was tagged by Steve Donahue this weekend, and he has some great analogies in his video. I'll link both below. Prompt 1. What most draws you into a novel or story and makes you want to keep reading? Is it the plot, the character, the writing style, the atmosphere, or something else? Well, Aristotle would, of course, go with plot and diction, and then at the very end, special effects. I'm not Aristotle, thank goodness. I hope I'm a little less tedious. That said, I'm very much a mood reader, so I intentionally mix up what I'm reading, and not just like fiction, nonfiction, but I'll be reading multiple fiction books at the same time in different genres that are pushing my mind in different ways and that I appreciate in different ways. Sometimes I want that journey to be driven by the plot, a sort of twisty crime novel. Sometimes I want it to be driven by, the characters, and the characters, the journey that I'm on is the characters. Sometimes it's, and a crime novel can do that. Sometimes it can be the atmosphere, the period evoked, the ideas evoked within that story or that novel, and I enjoy all of those. So I'm a mood reader. That said, in terms of writing style, I'm often aware of that, and I'll comment. I'll talk about it with my wife, with friends. But if I'm setting out knowing that's what I'm going to be paying attention to, that's what I want to be motivated by, I try to sort of save that for when I have a longer break and know I'll be able to read the book through and pay attention to that and really like sort of be very conscientious around and intentional as I'm reading that. Prompt 2. What is a convention or trope that will immediately turn you off in your reading experience with a novel or story? Roz at Scallydangling About the Books had a great point that the tropes are irrelevant if it's well written, and I agree with that. I was like, yeah, well done. That said, there's one thing that I don't like, and it's because I think it conflicts with sort of like my professional, like personal philosophy. And that is the trope where you have a character who seems just like a regular person and has some success, and then is revealed to suddenly be, the child, changeling or illegitimate or whatever, of the king or queen or magnificent wizard or, a demigod or whatever. And that idea that heredity and nobility, and it very much reinforces feudalism and feudal like concepts of humanity, which I strive against in my life. I teach at an alternative school. I work very hard to make sure that zip code is not the determining factor in like a kid's future. And so I don't like that in my fiction, and it pops up too frequently. Prompt 3. What most appeals to you when reading nonfiction and makes you want to keep reading? So Bill Rutenberg had a great note around how it's the weird, gritty details that flesh out human figures in history. And I agree with that. I would take it to another, like a deeper level and say, for me, it's the weird, like quirky details that make me chuckle or shake my head. It's the stuff around things like Richard the Lionheart on his way to the Third Crusade, happening like, on one of his sailing stops, happening by a place where it seemed like someone who wasn't a knight and was a commoner had a falconer hawk, and that violates the codes of chivalry. So he's going to appoint himself, the local law enforcement, to go in and take that away and put them in their place. And the locals, of course, try to put him in his place and nearly kill him. And so it's like those things where it's just like, wait, that happened? It's the idea of all the people Jefferson wrote letters to trying to marry, like, while horrible things were happening. It's the very strange, like, weird details of history or of nature or human thought that I just find interesting and that always keep me like curious. I like to think that I'm a curious person, an inquisitive person. I like to think that I'm helping my daughters become curious and inquisitive people, and not just through reading but asking questions. And so I enjoy those aspects of nonfiction. I also just like well-written nonfiction. So even if it's a thinker I disagree with, like Diderot is someone who philosophically I'm pretty far away from on a number of ideas. Yet I'm fascinated by Diderot's thinking and his writing, and I frequently enjoy it, even when I disagree with it. This is the Viking Portable Age of Reason reader. Michael Herr in Dispatches does a good job of presenting another quality aspect of nonfiction, which is maybe having a side and feeling that there is a right side and a wrong side on a historical event or on an issue, but also being willing to sort of lay out what is happening. So this is Dispatches, which he was writing during the Vietnam War. So now, prompt 4, what is a convention or trope in nonfiction that will turn you off? And for me, it's that very dry recital of facts. I think a nonfiction book should be more engaging in a richer experience, aesthetically or mentally or whatever, than if I was to scan Wikipedia and, get the facts, assuming that hopefully it's been updated and edited correctly. And an example of that would be Xenophon writing about Socrates and Plato writing about Socrates in the early, versions of Plato where it's more of a historical Socrates. Xenophon's Anabasis, the Persian expedition, is magnificent. I love it. His writing on Socrates is boring. Especially if you compare the Apologia in Xenophon to the Apologia in Plato, they each find different aspects of the person of Socrates and of the historical event that are important that they emphasize, and Plato creates this legendary narrative and personage of Socrates, and Xenophon does not. He doesn't pull it off. And so I think that's an example of sort of where it's just very dry, like prompt 5. Would you say you read more for pleasure and enjoyment or more to learn and exercise your brain? Both. Again, back to that idea of like curiosity. I'm a curious person, and so learning is enjoyable. But also those journeys of a narrative or of characters, those are enjoyable for me. And so I'm kind of all over the place, I love like the cheap crime fiction like John D. MacDonald, Purple Place for Dying, or something like P.G. Wodehouse's Thank You, Jeeves. But at the same time, I really enjoy having, my mind pushed and pulled by something that's a little bit heavier, like The Sea by Iris Murdoch. Or even, going into a heavy subject matter, like the way Chekhov handles physical decline and mental illness in Ward Number 6. Great story. Or all of the trauma that Toni Morrison's exploring in The Bluest Eye. These are both, like, very intense works to read, but they're rich works to read. And so I love that. Prompt 6. Which type of books are you likely to rate more highly and enjoy more overall? Is it the brain candy, sort of those pleasurable, enjoyable books, or is it the brain protein, the learning and exercise books? So I'll go with my exercise analogy here, which is, there's the joke around people who go to the gym and only work out particular muscle groups, whether it's like chest muscles doing bench press, or, their arm exercises, so they have like big, strong arm muscles, but then they never work out their legs, and so they're like teetering around. And there's jokes around that. And I think reading is the same way. The mind is the same way. There are different aspects, of our mind, of our consciousness, of our identity as human beings. And it's nice to have each of those being, sort of developed and pushed and by my reading experience. I really like that. I like to, work out all the aspects of my mind. And particularly with the idea that, if we think of ideas as sort of light, when we take ideas in, we can reflect them and just sort of be like, yes, like I agree with that, like good to go. Or we can refract it, where we take it, we turn it, we filter it through our experience, and we start to make the idea our own and do something with it in a more personal way. And I really like, I like to, I would hope that I do that as I'm reading, and that's how I'm learning. And so I enjoy all of those things. And I also think that as I've gotten a little bit older and read more books, I can be a bit more discerning in terms of what I'll enjoy, regardless of the genre, regardless of fiction, nonfiction, subject matter. I can identify, okay, this is something I'm going to like, and that I should spend my time, reading versus maybe not. Prompt 7. Do you have a sense early on of whether or not the book you're reading will be a 5-star read? And has a book ever surprised you in this regard? And so I guess I go back to that idea of, I think I'm much more discerning now at 34 than I was at 22 or 24 in terms of what I'm going to spend my time reading. There are books I've read that I will never reread. Like I keep a I'm on Goodreads, so I have the 5-star. But I, in my own personal reading list for, gosh, what is it now, 14, 15, even longer years, I have a personal reading list going back into the, early 2000s. And it's just binary. I keep a list of everything, and anything I would reread or recommend, I just make a little mark next to. And if I wouldn't, it's just, I read it, but there's no notation next to it. That's it. And I guess I just feel like I'm more discerning in terms of what I'm going to spend my time reading. Particularly, as I've become a parent, I read with my kids all the time. And so if I'm going to read on my own, I want it to be something that I'm going to enjoy and will hopefully edify me a bit. So in terms of, has a book ever surprised you in this regard? I think there are books that I generally will know I'm going to enjoy, but I don't always know how much I'll enjoy them. And so that's the pleasant surprise. Books like Uncertain Glory by Joan this year. I didn't know I was going to love that. Ovid's Metamorphoses. I knew I was going to love that. I just hadn't had a chance to read it yet. So that's, I guess, where I'm at. Prompt 8. Considering books that you've rated 5 stars in the past, do you think you would feel the same way about them now? Well, I would say probably the books I've read over the past 4 or 5 years, I'm probably going to feel the same way about those. Some of the books that I once thought I really enjoyed, I don't feel the same way. I've reread some of them, and I went, what was I thinking? Or my wife will, will ask, like, hey, you read this, what did you think? And I'll go, what did I think? And I kind of have to go back through and we'll talk about it, and she'll go like, should I read this? And I'm like, well, here's what I got from it. And she does the same for me, or I'll read a book and recommend it, and she'll read it and kind of point out some things. I go, oh yeah, that's right. Like, what was that? I was 22. I was 23. So I guess that's where I'm at. Prompt 9, tag some people. I don't think Timmy at Lost Cunningham has been tagged. And I think I'd be interested in what he and maybe even his wife would have to say about this. So I'll tag him. A lot of other people have been tagged. I'm kind of late on this one. So this is the self-aware reader tag. I don't know. Let me know how unaware I was or what your thoughts are. And again, I hope you have a great week. Thank you.